Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Melanin Margin, the weekly chat show where conversations about race are never off the table. We're your hosts, Quaviondre Williams.
And Daquon Wilson.
So let's get into this week's conversation. What's hot on the table this week?
A bill that was pushed by Florida Republican Governor Ron DeSantis would prohibit public schools and private businesses from making white people feel discomfort when they teach students or train employees about discrimination in the nation's past. This bill continues moving through the state legislature. The Senate Education Committee approved the bill that takes aim at critical race theory, though it doesn't mention it explicitly on party lines, with Republicans in favor and Democrats opposed. The bill, called Individual Freedom, reads in part, quote, "An individual, by virtue of his or her race or sex, does not bear responsibility for actions committed in the past by other members of the same race or sex. An individual should not be made to feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any other form of psychological distress on account of his or her race." Republican Senator Manny Diaz, a Cuban American and the bill's sponsor, said is not about ignoring the dark parts of American history, but rather ensuring that people are not blamed for sins of the past. Quote, "No individual is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive, whether consciously or unconsciously, solely by the virtue of his or her race or sex," Diaz said. Quote, "No race is inherently superior to another race," end quote. DeSantis co-signed this statement by saying, quote, "You think about what MLK stood for. He said he didn't want people to be judged on the color of their skin, but on the content of their character. You listen to some of these people nowadays, they don't talk about that," end quote. So, Andre, what are your thoughts on the bill and the comments made by Senator Diaz and Governor DeSantis?
So let's clarify what critical race theory actually is. See, critical race theory is a way of thinking about America's history through the lens of racism. It was developed during the 1970s and 1980s in response to what scholars viewed as a lack of racial progress following the civil rights legislation of the 1960s. It centers on the idea that racism is systemic in nations' institutions and that they will function to maintain the dominance of white people in society. Now, white supremacy, sexism, homophobia, and racism, to name a few, are not inherent ideals, like he says, but they are ideals that are taught and reinforced by our society. The statement that these ideals are not inherent is flawed because it doesn't take into the account the sociological or the psychological perspective. You see, no white child is born believing that they are superior to a black child. But when that white child grows up and reads history books that teach them the false narrative that white people discovered America and quote unquote saved the savages, they begin to believe that white people know better. When they see depictions of the most prominent religious figures and deities as white, they begin to believe that white people are spiritually better. And when they see themselves reflected the most on screen as heroes, doctors, lawyers, presidents, governors, award winners, and so on, it leads them to believe that white people simply achieve better. To ignore these factors is to ignore the lasting effect of how America's violently racist history has irrevocably shaped today's world and how that lack of education about it will continue to keep our world in the confines of systemic oppression for years to come.
Literally, that was poetry to my ears, because I agree on every single count. Like, just reading these comments, I'm like, as always, but especially during Black History Month,
Yep.
I am sick and tired. I am disgusted. I am throwing
I
up,
am
vomiting.
disgusted.
Like,
I'm
I
disgusted.
am disgusted. at people misusing Martin Luther King's I Had a Dream speech and
Yeah.
all of his teachings and his messages for this
Mm-hmm.
bullshit. Because, like, let's be honest, that was exactly what this is.
Exactly.
And see, the biggest problem with this is I feel like this fails to really consider what's at the, center of this issue, the center
Mm-hmm.
of all of this discomfort and everything with critical race theory. Because if you listen to facts about history, because
Mm-hmm.
let's be honest, what people are teaching are facts about history.
Yeah.
Slavery is a fact. That's not, somebody's opinion.
Exactly.
Jim Crow was a fact. That's not
Yes.
somebody's opinion. So when you are teaching these things about America's egregious past and you feel guilty, I think that says more about you than what's being taught. Because I know that, you know, I can hear people talk about things that Black people have done and
Mm-hmm.
not feel guilty because I know that I'm not that person.
Mm-hmm.
So if you see such a egregious act of violence against Black people and you feel guilty, I think that discomfort is something that you should sit in, because I know myself, the feelings of discomfort are what makes us grow the most. The feelings
Exactly.
of discomfort are what makes us, click something in our brain and makes us think, why are we uncomfortable in this moment?
Mm-hmm.
What exactly is making us feel uncomfortable? What does that say about what I'm viewing? What does that
Mm-hmm.
say about who I am as a person? Even as a writer, I love playing with discomfort, making people
Mm-hmm.
feel uneasy based off of the things I write, because they really have to reflect on what it is that's making them uncomfortable. So when you say you are discomfortable or uncomfortable learning about the sins of America's past, I think a lot of that comes from you don't want to think about, somebody like your father, your mother, your grandparents doing these things, because let's be real. Civil rights was not that long ago.
Not
Jim
at
Crow
all.
was not that long ago. My father integrated his school. So we are, one generation away from all of that stuff. Millennials in this country are the first generation that was born after Brown v. Board, after segregation was outlawed. So for a lot of these people in power who are older, many of our senators, governors,
Mm-hmm.
and all of these politicians are of an older generation. Either they themselves or, their parent, grandparent, whatever, were engaged in this, you know, egregious act in
Mm-hmm.
America's past. And so that's why they feel so much discomfort, because their parents did it and their parents probably taught them that. And now they have to be uncomfortable with the thoughts that they have and being like, well, like, I'm not racist. I just have these thoughts. And it's like, well, if you're not racist, then why are you making such a big deal about people just teaching about racism?
Exactly. I think we are tired of placating white people. We are tired
Ooh,
of
say that
trying.
again.
We are tired. We are tired of placating white people. We are,
Exhausted.
it's done. Like, I'm tired of drying those white tears. I'm tired of having to explain over and over and over and over again that even though you yourself didn't create systemic racism, your ancestors did, and you still benefit from it being upheld. We're tired of
Right.
white parents being so afraid of little Tommy and Jessica being taught how to be more respectful to people who look different than them. I mean, several Black and POC children experience racism on the daily by other children, teachers, and parents. If our children are old enough to deal with it, then I promise you, little Tommy and Jessica are old enough to learn how not to be the same racist, microaggression using assholes that their parents are. Just because you, as a white person, want to ignore it because it makes you uncomfy, it doesn't mean that prejudice goes away. It doesn't fade. It doesn't
Right.
vanish suddenly. Like, it frustrates me so much that we are still having to have this conversation. That people are still just, we don't want to make white people feel bad. They can't. Like, they're the ones that need to be protected. Like they're the ones
Exactly.
that need protection.
Right.
We
And I think that another part of this entire conversation is just like what deems something as being uncomfortable. Like,
mm,
because at that part, you open up a precedent for prohibiting just about anything.
yeah,
Oh, I don't want my daughter to hear all about slavery. That makes me uncomfortable. So I don't want that to be taught to her. I don't want my son to learn about, the Jim Crow era because that makes me uncomfortable.
yeah,
Because what qualifies discomfort? What
exactly.
measurable thing qualifies somebody's discomfort? There's not. And so that opens up a can of worms where basically anything can get thrown out, and it's just like, oh, whatever. It makes me uncomfortable, so I don't want
Yeah,
to learn it. But also, like, taking from white people's favorite, phrase, if the roles were reversed, they wouldn't
yeah,
hear it. They wouldn't hear it if a Middle Eastern person was like, I don't want to learn about 9/11 because it makes me uncomfortable how other
exactly,
people put that on my people.
exactly.
They wouldn't want to hear it. They would be like, never forget, never forget. And it's like, that is a part of our history as well. So when it comes to our history as a country, it needs to be learned, period, point blank. We don't need to be picking and choosing and candy coating what our history is because it's facts.
Yeah, I think it's really, and what really kind of makes this so much more disheartening is the fact that the person who sponsored this bill is a Cuban American.
I'm
And
not so disheartened by that just because, Cuba has like I've done research on it. Cuba
mhm.
has a very interesting history when it comes to race. So
But I
I'm
mean, for
not
me,
really surprised.
it's not surprising, but it's disheartening that once again it's another person of color attacking other people of color. Because to me, this is an attack. It may not seem
Mhm.
like it on paper, but when you, as a person of color, try to again placate white people and say we want to make sure you feel okay, we want to make sure you feel all right, woo 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 woo, it really does further perpetuate this idea that there is a way that you can assimilate to whiteness by not aligning with black people. Does that make sense? Like
Mhm.
when you see because there's always those people who are trying to gain that white dollar, trying to gain that white privilege, trying to do whatever it takes to have white people say that they're one of us or they're one of us or whatever the case may be. The model minority complex. And it frustrates me that if it was a white person who did this and did the whole thing, it would not have shocked me. It would not have surprised me. But it just further goes into this theory of just how insidious white supremacy is. I've talked about it before, but it just goes to show you how insidious it is because they keep pitting us against each other and they set us on this idea that one of us could possibly get there. That if we just worked hard enough and we just fuck everybody else, if we keep fighting each other and we just say, hey, I'm the good one, I'm the right one. Look at us as the X, Y, and Z race. We're nice. We're not like the blacks. We don't want to keep fighting you. We want to actually help you. We want to help. We want to make you feel good. We want to make sure you're not feeling bad about what happened. And it just, like I said, when you see that over and over again, and it's happened multiple times through multiple races that try to align with whiteness by diminishing blackness, it just
Yeah.
it just frustrates me because once again we're still moving away from the true issue here, and that's white supremacy. We're moving from the true issue, the true people at fault for all of this, which is Caucasian people. And the fact that yet again they have us fighting amongst ourselves and fighting amongst each other when we all know that once again it's like an old magician's trick. You know what I'm saying? If we keep you focused here, you won't see the person walking in through the back and doing the whatever, or you won't see the rabbit getting put in the hat because your eyes are up here. We're going to keep you focused on this little piece right here, but keep this piece hidden. Does that, you know what I mean?
Mhm. I definitely agree that it is frustrating, to pit, people of color against people of color because like that's the whole goal of white supremacy is to make sure that we can pick and choose what we allow in. And
Yeah.
they know that they can't just have this narrow view of whiteness. Even if we think about in history, like we said in the previous episode, race is a social construct. So
Yeah.
there was a time when like Irish people and Italian immigrants, they were non-white compared to everybody else who claimed whiteness. But white supremacy was like, oh, we can't keep on excluding people in our zone. So let's let them in. Let's let them become white because then they're going to be on our side. And I think the same can be said for, certain people in the Latinx community where it's like, they come from Spain or they have Spanish heritage. And so phenotypically they are white and therefore they can get that into
Mm.
white supremacy.
Okay. I got you. I think it's it's just crazy. And I want to actually kind of ask you, Daquon. I have this metaphor that I've been playing with that kind
Mm-hmm.
of explains to people who may not understand how institutionalized racism and systemic oppression work. So I wanted to get your take on this real quick because of this particular topic. So as a white person, your ancestors forced Black people to build an 80-foot high hotel with a beautiful resort at the top floor. Now, they've given you a special key card to an elevator that can go straight up to the 80th floor. Now, some of you can't go there because you can only afford the lower levels, but the option is still there. However, Black people can only go up through the service entrance, which has a rickety staircase. Now, there are several obstructions along the way, service people who close off certain floors for extended periods of time. So we have to stay in the lower quality rooms of the lower floors. Now, the few of us that can make it up to floor 79 realize that there is a brick wall where the stairs of floor 80 should be. Now, there are a few white people who do try to take us up on the elevator with them, but they can't open the door at floor 80 because the elevator will only go up to floor 79 if there is someone on board without a key card. Now, we've already explained to the hotel manager as Black people that we can't get up the stairs to 79. There is no floor after that. And they say they don't believe us. They say they've been up the elevator to floor 80 themselves. They tell us that we're not looking hard enough, that we're not being patient enough. And they even go as far as to take us outside and count the floors to prove that there's an 80th floor. And if the elevator goes up to it, the stairs have to go there too. That's kind of how I think systemic racism works. The only way to fix the issue is to build a new hotel, but the elevator riders, white people, and the hotel manager, the government, don't see a need to because they can get to floor 80 just fine.
Bitch. I think that's a great like metaphor comparison because it really hits on the biggest issues of what systemic racism is. It's something that was ingrained in the design of something. So it doesn't matter, who you are as a person, an individual. The system itself is what perpetuates racism. And like you said before, there are people who try to like bring people up the elevator. And I think that can, coincide with like allyship to a certain extent of like there are white people who are doing anti-racist things and are trying to really make amends for the racist past of America, but at a certain extent there's still something blocking it. There's still this level of we still need to do something else because we can only go so far when the system itself is what's the problem. I like to think about it like a faulty desk. When you build a desk and you don't have all the screws, sure it can stand, but that foundation of the desk is faulty by itself and it will
By
fall
design.
eventually by design. So no matter how much you add a shim here, add a shim there, maybe add a screw afterwards, it's still a faulty desk and it still can break down. And that's the same thing with all of these systems. They were created by people who were racist. They were created by people who were sexist and all of the isms and bigotries there are. And so when you keep their system, and keep the motor going, no matter
Mm-hmm.
how many paint jobs you give that, no matter how many shims you put in it, no matter what you do to that system, it will still run that intended purpose that was created by the racist, sexist bigots who built it.
Exactly. And this is the reason why critical race theory needs to be taught in school. Period.
Period.